Galicia, Spain, 1940s. A boy no older than 12 walks alone, barefoot, clutching a bundle of shirts wrapped in paper. He knocks on doors, not as a salesman, but as a lifeline for his family. His name? Amancio Ortega. He wasn't raised in luxury. He didn't go to fancy schools. He didn't even finish school. What he did have was hunger. Real hunger. One night, his mother sat him down with tears in her eyes. "We can't afford to survive anymore," she said. That sentence didn't just break him, it built him. From that moment on, every step he took was war. War against poverty, war against the idea that wealth was reserved for the privileged. And decades later, that same boy, once too poor to buy a shirt, would own the company selling them to the world. But ZARA wasn't just built on thread and fabric, it was built on secrets, speed, obsession, control. While the rest of the fashion world followed trends, Ortega rewrote the rules. This is the raw, unfiltered story of how a delivery boy became the ghost-like billionaire behind ZARA, and how he forever changed the way the world shops. Before Amancio Ortega became a billionaire, before ZARA became a global powerhouse, there was only struggle. Born in 1936 in a small Spanish town, Ortega grew up in a world defined by hardship. His father was a railway worker and his family could barely afford to put food on the table. But the moment that changed everything came when Ortega was just 14 years old. One evening, as he walked home, he overheard his mother begging for credit at the local grocery store. She had no money left to buy food, and the humiliation in her voice was something Ortega would never forget. That day, he made a promise to himself. He would never be poor again. Determined to change his fate, Ortega dropped out of school and took a job as a delivery boy for a local tailor shop. He spent his days carrying bundles of expensive shirts and dresses to the city's wealthiest residents, watching as they spent fortunes on clothes that cost almost nothing to make. He studied everything, the fabrics, the designs, and most importantly, the ridiculous markups that made the rich even richer. It didn't take him long to realize something shocking. The fashion industry wasn't about creativity. It was about power and exclusivity. Luxury brands dictated what people wore, setting prices so high that only the elite could afford them. Ortega saw an opportunity. What if he could give ordinary people access to high fashion, but at a fraction of the cost? But he had no money, no connections, and no experience running a business. All he had was an idea and an unbreakable determination. With no formal education and no financial backing, Amancio Ortega had only one advantage: his relentless obsession with learning. As a teenager, he spent every waking moment studying how clothes were made, how fabrics were sourced, and how customers reacted to different styles. He wasn't just a delivery boy anymore, he was a silent observer of the industry's biggest secrets. By the time he turned 16, Ortega had moved beyond deliveries and secured a job inside Gala, a prestigious clothing store in La Coruña. Here, he worked as an assistant to the tailors, sewing garments and watching how expensive designer pieces were crafted. But what fascinated him most wasn't the stitching or the materials, it was the inefficiency of it all. He noticed something shocking. Fashion brands didn't actually produce their own clothes. Instead, they relied on outside suppliers who took months to manufacture designs, adding layers of delays and unnecessary costs. By the time a dress hit the shelves, its price had been inflated several times over, and if customers didn't buy it, the entire inventory was wasted. To Ortega, this system was broken, and in his mind, an idea was starting to form. What if he could design, produce, and sell clothing faster than anyone else without relying on expensive middlemen? But there was one problem: he was still just an employee, barely making enough to survive. If he wanted to change the game, he needed to take a risk. At 27, after over a decade of studying the industry, Ortega finally made his move. With a small amount of savings and the help of his wife, Rosalia Mera, he started his first business, a small workshop called Controversies. His goal was simple: sell high-quality, affordable robes directly to stores, cutting out the middlemen. It was a radical approach, and at first no one believed it would work. But Ortega had a secret weapon: speed. Unlike traditional manufacturers that took months to deliver products, Ortega and his team produced new designs in weeks. His model allowed him to adapt to demand instantly, something the fashion industry had never seen before. Little did he know, this small workshop would lay the foundation for something far bigger. Controversies was just the beginning. Amancio Ortega's direct-to-store model was working, and demand for his robes and nightgowns was growing fast. But something unexpected happened. Retailers weren't just ordering from him. They started asking for more styles, different fabrics, and new designs. Ortega realized something crucial. People didn't just want affordable clothes, they wanted fashion that moved as fast as their desires. Instead of sticking to a seasonal cycle like traditional brands, he started producing new designs constantly, reacting in real time to what people were buying. It was a revolutionary concept, but he still had one major problem. He was dependent on other retailers to sell his products. That's when he made a bold decision. If the stores wouldn't move as fast as he wanted, he would cut them out completely and open his own store. In 1975, with his wife Rosalia Mera, Ortega opened his first shop in La Coruña, Spain. He needed a name for this new venture, and he originally chose Zorba, inspired by the 1964 film Zorba the Greek. He even had the sign made. But just before launching, he discovered that a nearby bar already had the same name. With no time to start over, he and his team quickly rearranged the letters, eventually landing on a short, catchy name that felt just right: ZARA. From the very beginning, ZARA was nothing like traditional clothing stores. Instead of waiting months for new inventory, Ortega introduced a never-before-seen concept. His store would receive fresh designs every single week. Customers quickly realized that if they liked something, they had to buy it immediately, because by the time they returned, it might be gone. This sense of urgency and exclusivity was unheard of in the industry. Traditional luxury brands looked down on Ortega's approach, dismissing ZARA as disposable fashion. But what they didn't see was that he had just invented the concept of fast fashion, and it was about to take the world by storm. ZARA's first store in La Coruña was an instant success. Customers were hooked by the never-ending stream of new styles, and a word spread quickly. But Amancio Ortega wasn't satisfied with just one store. He had a much bigger vision. In the 1980s, most clothing brands were locked into the traditional fashion cycle. Designers would create collections months in advance, manufacturers would spend even more time producing them, and by the time they hit the shelves, trends had already started shifting. It was a slow, outdated system. Ortega saw the flaw and doubled down on his biggest advantage: speed. He built a tight supply chain that allowed ZARA to design, manufacture, and deliver clothes in just a few weeks, while competitors took up to 6 months. This was unheard of in the industry, but he didn't stop there. Ortega made another game-changing decision. Instead of spending millions on advertising like other brands, ZARA would spend nothing. There would be no celebrity endorsements, no flashy campaigns, no magazine spreads. Instead, he put all his money into expansion and prime real estate, placing ZARA stores in the world's most luxurious shopping districts, right next to high-end fashion brands like Gucci and Louis Vuitton. It was a brilliant psychological trick. Customers associated ZARA with luxury, but at a fraction of the price. And because the collections changed weekly, they felt exclusive, driving people to buy on impulse. By the late 1980s, ZARA had already expanded across Spain, but Ortega wasn't going to stop there. He had his eyes set on something much bigger: the international market. In 1988, ZARA opened its first store outside of Spain, in Portugal. The following year, they entered New York City, taking on the heart of American fashion. By 1990, ZARA had launched in France, the home of haute couture, proving that fast fashion wasn't just for budget shoppers. It was a force that could rival even the most elite designers. And with every new store, ZARA was rewriting the rules of the industry. As ZARA expanded into New York, France, and beyond, fashion giants started to panic. They had spent decades controlling trends, dictating what people wore, and setting sky-high prices. But Ortega had flipped the script. Instead of telling customers what to wear, he let them decide. With his fast production model, ZARA could spot a trend, design a new version, manufacture it, and have it in stores within 2 weeks. No other brand could keep up. As a result, shoppers began abandoning traditional retailers, choosing ZARA instead, where they could get the latest styles instantly and affordably. By the mid-1990s, Ortega's company, Inditex, had grown into a fashion empire with ZARA at its core. But here's the crazy part: no one knew who was behind it. Unlike fashion moguls such as Ralph Lauren or Giorgio Armani, Amancio Ortega refused to be the face of his brand. He never gave interviews, never attended fashion shows, and rarely even allowed himself to be photographed. In fact, for decades, there were almost no publicly available images of him. But while he stayed in the shadows, his fortune was growing at an unbelievable rate. In 2001, Ortega took Inditex public, and the stock price skyrocketed overnight. By the next morning, he was officially one of the richest men in the world. His net worth soared into the billions, and at one point, he even surpassed Bill Gates as the richest person on the planet. All thanks to a company that had never spent a dime on advertising. And yet, even as his fortune climbed into the tens of billions, Ortega refused to change his lifestyle. While other billionaires flaunted their wealth with yachts and private jets, Ortega continued to eat lunch in the same local cafe he had visited for years. He wore the same simple blue blazer and white shirt every day. And while ZARA became one of the most recognized brands in the world, most people still had no idea who he was. But while Ortega was quietly enjoying his success, a new crisis was looming, one that would threaten to bring down the entire fast fashion industry. As ZARA conquered the global fashion industry, competitors scrambled to keep up. But while customers loved the affordable prices and ever-changing styles, the rapid rise of fast fashion came with a hidden cost, one that would soon put Amancio Ortega and his empire under intense scrutiny. For years, ZARA had built its success on speed and efficiency, but that efficiency came at a price. Reports started surfacing about harsh working conditions in factories producing ZARA clothing. In 2011, an investigation in Brazil found that some workers were being subjected to sweatshop-like conditions, working in cramped spaces with little to no breaks. The controversy led to lawsuits, forcing ZARA to publicly deny any wrongdoing while vowing to improve oversight in its supply chain. Then came the environmental concerns. ZARA's entire business model relied on mass-producing clothing at lightning speed, but critics argued that this was fueling a waste crisis. Unlike luxury brands that created timeless fashion, fast fashion encouraged constant buying and discarding, leading to millions of tons of textile waste every year. Environmental groups slammed ZARA for its role in the problem, calling it one of the biggest polluters in the industry. But the biggest scandal of all came in 2017, when shoppers in Istanbul found hidden messages inside ZARA clothing tags. These weren't brand slogans or washing instructions, they were cries for help. Workers had secretly stitched notes into the garments, claiming they hadn't been paid for months and begging customers to demand action. The story went viral, and suddenly ZARA was facing a public relations nightmare. For the first time, the company's reputation was at risk, but Amancio Ortega, ever the strategist, responded in the only way he knew how, by adapting. ZARA pledged to overhaul its supply chain, introducing more ethical sourcing and committing to sustainability goals. The company announced plans to make all of its clothing from 100% sustainable fabrics by 2025, a bold move meant to silence critics. But even as the controversy raged on, one thing remained unchanged: ZARA's dominance in the fashion world. While other brands struggled to survive, Ortega's empire was still growing at an unstoppable pace. And in 2023, he made one final move that shocked the business world, a decision that would cement his legacy forever. By the time Amancio Ortega reached his 80s, he had already transformed the fashion industry into something unrecognizable. ZARA wasn't just a retail chain, it was a global phenomenon, and Ortega had amassed a fortune that few could even imagine. In 2023, ZARA's parent company, Inditex, was valued at a staggering $100 billion, making it one of the largest and most profitable fashion companies in the world. With over 7,000 stores in 96 countries, ZARA had become the dominant force in the fast fashion sector, reshaping the way the world shopped. Yet despite all of this, Ortega remained a quiet and private man, rarely seeking attention or recognition for his achievements. In the same year, Ortega's personal net worth was estimated at $70 billion, placing him among the richest people on the planet. But despite his immense wealth, he continued to live a life of remarkable simplicity. He still lived in the same modest apartment in La Coruña, Spain, and he was known to drive an old car, avoiding the extravagant displays of wealth typical of billionaires. But as Ortega's retirement approached, the business world couldn't help but wonder, what would happen to ZARA after he stepped down? Ortega made one final surprising decision. Rather than selling off his stake in Inditex or appointing a flashy successor, he quietly handed the reins to his daughter, Marta Ortega Perez. Marta, who had worked her way up through the company, was well prepared to take over. She had a deep understanding of ZARA's operations and was already known for her innovative ideas on digital transformation and sustainability. Under Marta's leadership, ZARA has begun a new chapter, one that embraces technology and a more sustainable future. The company is accelerating its efforts to become more eco-friendly, investing heavily in sustainable materials and waste reduction practices. Additionally, the digital revolution is well underway, with ZARA introducing new technologies like augmented reality to create interactive shopping experiences. But despite these changes, one thing remains constant: ZARA's ability to adapt and thrive. Ortega may have stepped out of the spotlight, but his legacy lives on in every trend the brand sets, every piece of clothing sold, and in the revolutionary business model he created. Today, ZARA still leads the charge in fast fashion, but Ortega's influence is felt across industries far beyond clothing. His vision of speed, simplicity, and disruption continues to inspire entrepreneurs and business leaders around the world. And so, as the world watches ZARA's evolution under Marta Ortega, the story of Amancio Ortega, the man who shaped the future of fashion, will never truly end. Amancio Ortega may have retired, but his impact on the fashion industry and the world of business will remain for generations to come. If you thought Amancio Ortega's rise to the top was impressive, wait until you hear the incredible story of the man who started it all from a small workshop and built a global empire. Stay tuned for the story of Ole Kirk Christensen, the mastermind behind Lego, and how he turned a humble toy company into one of the most iconic brands in the world. Click here to watch, from a small workshop to a global empire, and discover the untold secrets behind Lego's success.